But I understand that you spent 25 years in prison. Is that the case?
That is the case. I went to prison 55 days after my 17th birthday was when I was arrested for first-degree murder of my abuser.
Was that below the adult age in your state, or was 17 the you were charged as an adult?
I was charged as an adult immediately, but I was married at the age of 15, so that kind of probably put me in the adulthood. I got married a month after my 15th birthday. I met him in September. We got married in November 15th, and in September, we finally got divorced. I still could not get away. And in November of 1992, I was arrested for his murder, accessory to.
How soon into the relationship did you find out that this person was violent?
First part of the abuse started in December, beginning of December. So about 2 weeks into the marriage.
Had you shared with other people the type of abuse that you were experiencing?
I didn't really share it, but everybody knew. In 1992, domestic violence wasn't talked about like it was today. And I'm from a very small town with small minds. Back then, the mentality was, well, if you black her other eye, she'd listen better. Or, you should have popped her in the mouth harder. She wouldn't talk back so much. Domestic violence was more acceptable and it wasn't talked about. So even though friends and family knew how crazy he could get, because he often threatened to kill my family, my friends, to keep them away from me, would hunt me down whenever I'd run away. There was just no escape. So people knew, but back then people didn't do anything. 3 weeks prior to the actual murder happening, he had actually kidnapped me, even after restraining order and things like that, kidnapped me and took me to a wooded area and said he could shoot me and nobody would even know that he did it. I would just be missing. And so I believe that was the spiral that started everything. I had a new boyfriend that I'd only met 14 days prior, maybe 11 days. And I think a conversation just went from here to here. And next thing you know, we're at the house.
Did you expect that the justice system would naturally work out? You were obviously being victimized and you'd have your day in court and you'd be released. Were you shocked to be charged?
Shocked to be charged? No, because I was accessory. So I wouldn't say I was shocked to be charged. I was, however, told not to talk about the abuse. And it gave motive, is what an attorney told me. We're going to plead you not guilty, and that gives you motive. So I didn't understand the justice system. So, of course, he's the adult, he's the lawyer, so let's listen to what he tells me to do, right? So he's like, we're not going to talk about the abuse. We're not going to bring any of that into court. But once again, I'm from a very small area, and it's the good old boy system. I rub your back, you rub my back. So everybody knew each other. Here I was, a 17-year-old kid with all these adults that were in the good old boy system, if that makes sense. I was shocked that as soon as I got arrested, shortly after I went to a preliminary hearing and things like that happened, still no understanding of the justice system. What is going on? They have the death penalty against me. They're like, we're going to give you the death penalty. So I didn't have a concept of that. And I remember these huge lawyers coming from Columbia and, they were fighting for me. And then the victim's family dropped the death penalty. They said, we don't want to do the death penalty. We don't believe in that. And so all of a sudden, all these lawyers were gone and I was handed a public defender.
Were they there to deal or to defend you or just to kind of handle you?
I went through 2 different public defenders before I finally got the one. And actually they first gave me a public defender. They took him after I told him everything, and he actually ended up being my co-defendant's public defender. So to me now, years later, of course, I'm like, wait a minute, that was really not right. So, that's kind of just the system I had at where I'm from. Then I finally got a public defender. I think I seen him a minimal of 10 times the 2 years and 9 months I was incarcerated. The most I seen him was during my week jury trial.
Were you offered a plea?
I was offered 100 years. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I got so manipulated in the justice system. So here I am in county jail, and the detectives and the officers and all of them told me I got to change a venue. And they were like, you should change that back because we all know you. We all know, you know, all the circumstances. So I had my lawyer change the venue back to the small town I was in, not knowing at that time I was actually being manipulated by people in authority.
Once you get the ruling or the sentence, at what point beyond that did you start to realize that that means the rest of your life you're never supposed to get out?
Yeah. When I first was found guilty and sentenced to that, I had no concept at that age that life without parole really meant like life without parole. You know, I don't think that so I was 19 at this time, getting ready to go into adult prison. I didn't understand the concept of what just happened to me. But unfortunately, when I went to prison, I finally felt free for the first time, where most people feel more incarcerated. I was no longer being abused. I was no longer around people who could hurt me all the time. In my first few months of being sentenced, I actually felt relieved and safe.
At what point did you
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
At what point did you see some light in the tunnel as far as getting out?
So part of my story is in county jail, I was raped by an officer a few different times, and that came out. Of course, they covered that up, threatened me, threatened my family. He got promoted. I got locked in a cell, was told it would never happen. So about 17 years of my incarceration, that all came out. About the same time that happened was also when 2012, juveniles could no longer, under the age of 18, have life without the possibility of parole. Miller versus Alabama, Montgomery versus Louisiana. So that all of a sudden I had hope.
I think people hear about stories like yours, rape happening in prison, and I think generally people's mind just jumps right over it, because when you are kind of the evidence that these places that we sentence people to, that we sentence other people's children to go and serve time at, are truly not safe.
When I first went down, I was pretty lucky because I had as we called them, OGs, who had done a lot of time. And they actually called her Steve, was her name. Her name was Sheila. She actually had seen my newspaper article before I came and seen that here's this kid getting life without parole. And for some reason, she felt guided, and she kind of took me underneath her wing. And she showed me how to hustle in prison. She schooled me how to get the best jobs. So I got lucky in that sense. But seeing, I had other people come in. One was a 14-year-old came into adult prison. We had some 15-year-old come in adult prison. They weren't lucky like that. You've seen them get swooped up immediately into the games, the hustles, being manipulated and used. Hey, you do my dirty work, so they're the ones going to the hole, or, you know, hey, do sexual favors for me and you're safe. Those are the things that I would see.
What state were you in again?
Sorry.
Once the word gets out about the rape and the cover up of it, are you moved? Are you safe? Are you in more danger at the time?
This was in county jail where I was raped, and no, I was locked in my cell. I was locked in my cell. I was told little girls like me hang themselves all the time waiting for a murder trial. My family was told the same thing. There was a lot more that happened that came out. The sheriff, the prosecutor, the judges, they all covered it up because they didn't want it to mess up their murder case. So it was a huge cover up. And when that came out, it is actually because he had more victims. So they found, it was on videotape, him coming in my cell, all of that. So all of a sudden the evidence was found 17 years later.
Okay.
After I got out, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school. So I became a licensed esthetician. And then I signed up, and I'm still getting my BA in business administration. I got with a group called Campaign of Fair Sentencing of Youth. And they are amazing. And then I've got hired by Human Rights Watch, and I'm now an advocate in Life Without Parole on a National Leadership Council. And then what helped me a lot too was I started a nonprofit group called Prison Did Not Break Me. And we became a support group, and we're growing into helping people coming out of prison and their families, the transition that I think a lot of people need.
How common is that amongst the population of women that you encountered in prison?
I would say about 90% of them came either from watching domestic violence or not being involved in domestic violence themselves. Many had the background of sexual abuse, domestic violence, and that was more common than not. It was actually very uncommon to hear somebody hadn't gone through those things that were incarcerated. I think that it is viewed that women shouldn't commit crimes. So it's like a taboo that anybody's incarcerated anyway. That's a woman. But when you go into a female prison, most of your guards are male. They are not female. I remember when I first got to prison, there was a lot of male officers they would pat search you. And upon emergency, they could even strip search you. Now that law has changed due to lawsuits. You know, you can request a female. Males are not supposed to unless it's emergency. But it doesn't mean, like, say that you act out or you get into an altercation there. It doesn't mean that those male officers cannot tie you down, strip you down, and throw you in a cell if it's an emergency. But I think that women that come from domestic violence situations, when you go to prison and you have a male standing over you telling you, this is my yard and you're going to do what I say, and that triggers a person because they've already came from that. So those are the ways that women can feel unsafe in prison. Anybody that's incarcerated knows that not all guards are there to help you, that some of them are their goal in life is to demean you and make you feel worse as a person. And that happens a lot. I think that's really revolting, the way that they can treat women in prison. They can talk to them any kind of way and just leave them feeling less than, animalistic.
It feels like the perfect environment for a sadist. It's very sad that we haven't figured out yet that that's a problem.
Well, you only have to be 21, I think, to work in a prison with no other qualifications. I could share a story just in my incarceration that happened, and this just shows you that they do not check for mental health or any of those things. We had an officer and her boyfriend, they break up, they had a baby, she gets with another officer. He goes out, does a security check. He comes in the prison with a gun with 2 clips. He chases her down, shoots her, and then shoots himself in the prison yard on the prison steps. So that was the kind of mentality that we were living with.
So when you're in that situation as an incarcerated person, as a prisoner, you literally have no one to turn to, it sounds like, for your own protection. It sounds like you're kind of navigating this world where maybe everyone before incarceration, or the people who should have been charged with your care leading up to your incarceration, have obviously failed you. You're inside, housed, presumably for the rest of your life, with people who don't seem to be much better and are, may have sadistic impulses that run uncontained for decades, leaving, dozens or hundreds of women abused along the way. And you still have to navigate the politics of how to survive within that.
Solitary confinement for insulting behavior, different things like that, getting in fights. So because here I was a teenager, you just sent me, you know, and finally when I get to prison, I understand the concept finally that, oh wait, I'm never getting out of here. So of course I'm like, well, party time. So I never really cared what the officer said to me. If they talk crazy to me, I'm going to talk crazy to you. However, when we talk crazy back to somebody, we're going to solitary confinement. And I learned very quickly they could treat me however they wanted. I had rules and regulations how I could speak to them though. You can, you know, they could tell me I'm a dog or this, or you grab a toothbrush and you clean that brick. Well, what did I do? Because I said you're going to. And so I had a problem with that for a while. And yeah, you know, at first when I went to prison, I felt safe. Then after a while, when you're around these men that are treating you just like the person you went to prison over, it is difficult. It's difficult to maneuver all that. And people think that people go to prison because we're being rehabilitated. You choose to rehabilitate in prison. Nothing in prison makes you, because you can get in the games, you can play all the hustling sides, you can get engaged, whatever it is that's going on in that prison system. A person has to choose to rehabilitate. They offer classes, but if you're forced to take them, nobody cares. But when you have people coming in and they want to take the classes, they want to be a better person because they don't want to be that same person. That's what happened to me. I took a class that said, hey, there are victims to your choices. And that class changed my life. And I know it's changed many people's lives. So that's when my turnaround in prison happened. I was like, I want to be a better person. I don't want to be the person that I've been. And that was my turnaround. So it wasn't because, you know, the prison system, it was because I had to choose to want to be a better person.
It's easy for us to hear your story and think, oh, well, she shouldn't be there. Of course you shouldn't. You're the person sitting here out doing the interview. But who is in there?
Kristen Allen is her name, and she's in Chillicothe Correctional Center. And I'll just give you a little bit of her case, is that she was trying to get out of a domestic violence situation. Her boyfriend had her, he found out about it, had her invite the guy over that was going to help her get out. He beat the guy to death. So, of course, they're like, oh, she set him up. She even had evidence that he was trying to help her get out of this abusive relationship with her 2-year-old daughter. So here she's sitting now. It's almost been 28, maybe 30 years now. He killed himself in prison. So here she's left holding the bag still almost 30 years later when she was trying to get out of a domestic violence situation. And he even said to her, I would rather watch you die in prison than ever let you be free. So his abuse continued and still continues because she's still a victim of him and the system at this point.
So how does she survive that? Why is she still kicking?
She is very spiritual and she has put a lot of trust into God. She just had a clemency denied not too long ago from the governor because Missouri's not known for, you know, giving very many people commuted sentences. And we continue to fight for her and many others. But I think she has hope. She still has hope. She sees I was released. She sees that I had a stepmother that was in there too. She did 36 years in prison. I have, you know, another friend that did 32 years in prison. And all of us have came out from domestic violence situations. So I think that gives her hope that she sees us. She knows we're still out here fighting for her. But she also has succumbed to the idea if this is God's plan for her, then she needs to do what she's supposed to do there. Before I went to prison, I was the same person who thought if people go to jail, throw away the key. They deserve to be there because I didn't know any different. Nobody had taught me about system impacted people. I hadn't been touched by it. So until I experienced it for myself, I didn't know either. We are missing that good people are incarcerated, that good people make bad choices. And if we define a whole person's life by one choice in one moment, What fair is that to humanity? My National Council leadership, we are all people who serve life without parole, but we are all serving our community. We are all advocating. They're going back into the prisons, sharing what they learned and how to change their lives. We are not animals just locked away in cages. We are human beings that made some bad choices. And a lot of times I think if society would look at it instead of a blanket case, okay, here it is, there it is. I think if they would look at, let's look at each individual, what circumstances led to the situation and could have been avoided, and who are they today? People keep judging people about this one thing. And I understand that the worst of the worst crimes absolutely are hard to swallow. But what led up to that? For me, being raped, emotionally, sexually, mentally abused for 2 years led to a breaking point. It wasn't I just woke up one day and decided this is who I am.
I have no further questions.
But I hope I answered all of your questions. Look at Norway. Norway's correctional system, it's working. So why isn't everybody else following it? You know, let's find something that works and say, hey, this is working, so let's try that.
Where can people follow you or find out more about your work?
I'm with Human Rights Watch, but also they can find me with Prison Did Not Break Me. We're on Facebook, and Prison Did Not Break Me at gmail.com if they want to find me there. And I share my story on TikTok a lot, and it's also under Prison Did Not Break Me. So they can find me on those platforms at this point.
Thanks a lot, Sheena.